Hey, podcast listeners! Thanks for tuning in today. On the podcast, we have Stacy Krafczyk. She's the owner of All Spirit Healing. Stacy is internationally known for her work as a professional animal communicator, working on a physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental level to promote healing in your pet. She's also a Reiki master teacher and intuitive reader and medium. She's brought healing of emotional traumas to animals using the same techniques that are available to us humans. Her work has been featured in articles, radio shows, and on Animal Advocate TV, both nationally and internationally. You can learn all about Stacy and her work at allspirithealing.com. And today I'm really excited to get into topics with Stacy. We're going to talk about 5 ways that your dog talks to you without saying a word. So Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. I'm so excited to be here and to connect with you and the listeners from all over. So I'm excited.
Great. So why don't you take a second to fill in anything I might have missed there in the intro, and we'll get right into your story and your work and how it can help our listeners.
Definitely. So I've been a professional animal communicator for about 16 years, and I recently moved from Wisconsin to California almost 8 months ago. So for 44 years of my life, I was in Wisconsin in the frozen tundra. And decided to make the move to Southern California for the weather, the sun, and just more peace of mind, where it felt like I was kind of claustrophobic in Wisconsin. So I'm very excited to be here in Southern Cal, but my business is done mostly over the phone or provided successfully over the phone for people. And they just email me photos of their humans and animals, and then we connect that way through the phone. So I do a little bit of the animal communication. I also am a Reiki master teacher, which is just another form of energy healing. I'm also able to provide that for the humans as well as the animals in person or over the phone. And I'm intuitive as well as a medium, so I can connect with people and animals that are here on the earth, as well as that once have crossed over, so I can bring closure and peace of mind after the animal has passed away.
Okay, well, excited to get into all those topics, and I know that our listeners are as well. A lot of interesting things that come up there that we haven't covered on the show, and would love to dive into all of it with you. So first question is, you mentioned you're 16 years ago, you became a professional animal communicator. So what were you doing before, and then what was the journey that got you started on that and defining you as a professional animal communicator?
Yeah, it's another fascinating story. Is I worked at an animal shelter in Wisconsin for about 9 years, and I was also an animal control officer for Milwaukee County. So there was Waukesha County, which was a half hour from Milwaukee County. So I had a full-time job and then a part-time job, both working with animals. And it was through an unhealthy relationship where I created migraines for myself, and Western medicine wasn't working for me. So I tried meditation. I actually read an article where meditation was supposed to help with migraines. And by that point, I was willing to do anything. And they were debilitating, where I was actually in the emergency room a couple times a week and throwing up and having to, wear ice packs around my head just to function. So through meditation, I was able to get more of a center and a peace of mind for my physical health. And then through meditation, is my emotions calmed enough for my gift to start to unfold. Mm-hmm. And then, and then through meditation, repeated meditation is where some of my gifts started coming. And I was working with a teacher to kind of help to fine tune my gifts, and then reading lots of books and then taking tons of classes. So I was like a little sponge. So it was a dark night of the soul that actually brought me to the spiritually enlightened path. And then each job eventually fell away. So from the full-time job, I just worked the part-time job, and then did this, communication and energy work on the side. And I didn't charge at all when I first started. And then my teacher would nudge me. She's like, okay, so now here's your business card, here's your brochure, and now start charging. And I was like, wait. So I kicked and screamed literally the entire way, where I didn't want to go down this path, and it was scary. It was new. And back in the day, it was, frowned upon, and, believed it was, the devil's work and different things like that. So I understand the skepticism part where we all have our frame of mind and what we can gauge things off of. So if you can't tangibly see something, especially, being a Dr. Doolittle and talking to the animals, it's just like, oh, this chick is crazy. But over time, I just got more confident within myself. The naysayers fell away and they were no longer on my radar. And then the part-time job fell away. And then this became my full-time career, and then just has kind of taken off from there.
And so what was that first, can you take us to that moment where you first realized that maybe you had some sort of a gift? I mean, were you there with a dog and you felt like you knew what the dog was saying in some kind of language, or what was that experience like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Back at the animal shelter, before I became awakened, is I always could handle any aggressive dog. Like most of the time people would come to me and say, hey, can you move the dog in the back, without having to use a snare pole, which is the long metal pole with the noose. And so there was just something within me, whether it was the softness or, just the understanding or being misunderstood, the animals, as well as I felt the same way, so I could handle them better. So that was before of like an unknown understanding. And then the more I became aware of my gifts when I was at the animal shelters, also when this all started, and I could feel it in my gut, what the animal needed, or I would see an impression in my mind or an image. So it was almost like they just started like just talking to me here and there, and I was getting it clearer and quicker in more of a conscious awareness state than just kind of that numbed out where we all pretty much are throughout our day, as we just are existing and going down our task. And so this is just calling us to slow down a little bit more. And at the animal shelter, I was able to kind of pick up on their needs and wants.
Got it. Okay. So, people listening now, we have dogs and we're used to observing them. And sometimes we feel like we know what they need or they want or what they're saying. So let's get right into some of those 5 ways that our dogs talk to us without saying a word. So what's the first way that comes to mind for you, and what would an owner notice or look out for?
When their animal is ticked off at them, when their animal is upset, pissed, mad, where a lot of times people will say to me before we get on the phone, or if I'm in person with them, like, I think my animal's mad at me. So there is an intuitive knowing that like something's a little off. It's also very common for the animal to be upset that you moved my bed. We're just like, well, yeah, we moved the Christmas tree into the house, so of course we had to move the bed. Or you completely like rearrange the house and you forget about Fido on the floor, where he just like, hey, what's going on? There was another animal that actually was blind, and the woman rearranged the room. And so the dog was used to it, so he never entered even into the room anymore. And she couldn't understand why, but he sensed that things were askew. And so he would just stand in the hall. So then she moved everything back, and then he walked into the room and just laid down in his normal spot. So it's just like, hey, what about me?
Right.
So it's very common for us as humans just to overlook, that the animal's needs on the floor, the dog, and how that affects them. So this is just more about bringing this awareness of like, I know my animal's mad, but how can I help that or fix that?
So are there any really easy telltale signs when a dog is giving the I'm pissed behavior that are dead giveaways?
Oh, definitely. Pooping and peeing in the house. So especially if it's a well-behaved animal, I always say it's 90-10. So 90% of the issues of urinating or defecating in the house usually points right back to the human and something that we might have done wrong. So pooping and peeing is a big one. And peeing in the house means they're pissed off. So they're literally pissed off about something. And being destructive, chewing, carpeting, shoes, wood, floor, whatever it is. So that's a way of letting us know that they're unhappy. So with people, there's usually a telltale sign with people, like, so you're calling George and George isn't answering the phone, or you walk into the door and someone's not giving you eye contact, where you feel like, oh, I just got the cold shoulder. Same thing for animals. So pretty much everything can be applied from people to animals. So
Okay.
those are three big ways that how you can tell when an animal is not happy, as well as won't even give you eye contact. That's another one. We'll like look over to the left, like, nope, not gonna look at you. Mm-hmm.
So what's another one of these ways that dogs talk to us without saying a word? I've got a list here, but what comes to mind for you next?
Is love, and how they just love us. We can walk in the door and the dogs can be, breaking their back because they're so happy with the whole body wag and tail. And if we're having a hard day, we're sitting or laying on the couch, the dog comes over and tries to lay on top of us or licks away our tears. But even if it's just an eye contact, it's just a look in their eye. But it's also a feeling, an image that may not be seen to the eye, but felt in your gut or in your heart. We're like, they just love us so much. Even if they do something wrong and then we get mad at them, but there's just this unconditional love that they offer us all the time. And animals are little angels and healers. So I always say they come to us for healing and teaching us as much as we are for them. And what are they helping us to overcome or get through certain places in our life is just like a sense of stability and unconditional love that they offer us, in the good as well as the uncomfortable.
So the next one I have on my list here is I need some fun.
Yes, that's another common complaint is bored. And the people will say, the dog is driving me crazy. What is going on? And the dog is just literally bouncing. Like if I were to be standing here or sitting here talking to you and bounding, like I said, I can't sit still. I'm just bouncing. And it's just the dog is looking for more fun. And like, no matter how many walks I'm taking the dog, it's not wearing them out. So spicing up the walk, going on different routes on the walk, but it's just this extra energy that doesn't seem to be able to be dispersed. And it's like we get bored, animals get bored too. So part of that, looking for more fun is also they can be a little destructive as well, because they're trying to find their own fun, or they're not listening to you when you're outside and they're off leash, because they're kind of like, hey, I'm going to go, sow my oats and have fun and burn off some energy if you're not going to do it for me or with me. So boredom is another big one. So they want to have more fun, car rides, exercise, dog parks, and even some people that don't bring dogs to dog parks, you can rent an agility space and bring your animal and run them off for about an hour, and all that extra energy. There's my cat coming in.
So what about I'm hungry? I feel like these are all pretty intuitive, and most owners would be able to tell some of these signs. So I've got I'm hungry and I'm happy are the last two on our list.
Yes. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because anybody who shares their life with an animal is already intuitively connected, just not consciously aware of how they're communicating with their animals. So when they're not happy with their food, they're going to look at the food dish kind of like, are you kidding me? Like, what's that? Or if we do change their food and we don't tell them, whether it's for health reasons or they have an upset belly and we're giving them ground beef and rice. So with food is just also boredom, and human food. A lot of animals, a lot of dogs prefer more human foods and snacks. And with food also comes treats. So a lot of times animals will ask me, whatever happened to those treats that you used to give me in that silver bag with that white coating, or the purple bag? Oh, there's my cat again.
That's fine.
She likes to be part of it. So we get bored. So whether we had McDonald's every day, or if we had steak and lobster every day, it gets very boring. So animals can be very communicative and can do a hunger strike with their food and being bored.
Okay. So why don't we get into some of the services you offer? I think it would pique a lot of interest of people listening, and I'm on your website here, and the first one at the top of the list is afterlife communication. So can you talk a little bit about that, how you got into that, how it works, and maybe even some really compelling or powerful stories of some of the work you've done there for pet owners?
Definitely. With animal communication and afterlife services is when our animals pass away and we're unable to always receive the closure that we need. And it's from my belief and my experience is that our body is just the vessel, and our soul goes from our body on the earthly plane into the spirit plane or into heaven. And their soul can change, grow, and evolve, or it can stay the same. And they can communicate the same as if they were here on the earth. And they come through with some really cool validations that they're still with their humans and even their animal companions that they left on the earth. So it's just a different dimension, or even a different like frequency, I would say. So it's just like having a conversation with a human, or even like I like to give the example of playing charades or even Pictionary, where you're like you have symbols and then you're drawing little images on the board. So it's not like the communication how you and I are talking today. It's more telepathic, which is thoughts, feelings, images, and feelings being transferred back and forth between human to human, human to animal, and animal to animal. Mm-hmm. So real quick with humans, it's just like, oh, I was thinking of Trixie, and all of a sudden Trixie calls you on the phone. You're like, I was just thinking about you. So it's similar to that. And with telepathy, we go through more fine details and descriptions and emotions. When I connect with the animal in the spirit plane and the humans on the phone or in person if I'm at a venue, so it's a three-way conversation. And Einstein says, everything is energy. So there really is no time and space. And it's like having a three-way phone call. So I'll communicate with the animal and ask, how are they feeling, or what are they doing now, or what are they seeing? And a lot of times the animal will say, I can walk on all four legs. And I said, oh, the animal says it can walk on all four legs. Did it have problems walking, or it had, 3 legs on the earth, but now in the spirit plane, it's completely revived and replenished and perfect health again. So a lot of times animals will give validations and point out different things of how they were when they were here on the earth compared to how they are now. Another example of how they are with us and watching over us, there was a client too that literally built a memorial for her dog in the backyard. She had a rock with a metal plate or plaque that was engraved, a bush, and then a tree, and then a bench. And this dog described it to me to a T. And I'm like, and in my head, my left brain logic was like, oh, this must be a park. And so I was telling her, she's like, oh yeah, that's in my backyard. And she starts sobbing because she didn't know that her dog saw that. So it was the validation that even though he's in a different form, he's still with her now. Another example, which can be a little far-fetched for some listeners, which is okay, but I always say it's okay to be skeptical, but just remain open, is also, there was another client of mine, and his yellow lab had passed, and it had snowed, and he had woke up in the middle of the morning, and he saw footprints in the snow, and his dog had died. And he didn't have another dog, but they started out of nowhere and then they ended out of nowhere. So it was just like in the middle of the yard, and probably about 5-foot stretch of snow were paw prints that just logically doesn't make sense. And it could be like, oh, of course the snow, the wind is blowing and it erased some of the paw tracks, but he knew that it was his dog that had come back to say hi. And the client, who's like a macho man, was in tears because he's like, that was the sign that I needed to know that my dog was okay.
Well, and so how do customers come to you for that type of service?
A lot of times, well, I'd say about a good percentage is about 90% over the phone. A lot of my business is also referrals, so word of mouth. And how it would work is they would just go onto my website to schedule an appointment, and then they would receive an email confirmation of everything that they need to send me and the phone number that to call them at. And I don't want to know anything but the animal's age, name, and gender. And then I'll begin communicating with them first, and then I'll stop for the owners to have their questions or concerns to be answered. So it is kind of like a three-way conversation where I talk to the animal first, I relay the messages, and then a lot of times the animal will answer the questions before the human gets to ask them. So I tell people to write down their questions, but to keep them. I don't want to see them. I just want to make sure that your questions get answered by the time that our session is done.
Interesting. So they'll write a list of questions, and you'll open the pathway of communication with the deceased dog, and essentially through that communication, those questions that the owner had get answered.
A lot of times, yes. Yeah. And a lot of times it's the validations that there's no way that I would even know them, because I'm a stranger to the human and to the animal, but just the very clear communication and the examples. It's just like, there's no way you would know that. And even the personality of the dog coming back very regal and very stoic and kind of like a know-it-all bossy dog. And you can have a dog that comes through that's a big old dork, like puppies and rainbows and sunshine and kittens, so their personality will come through. And that's usually what I pick up first, to relay the messages, but also to validate the connection.
Interesting. And you don't have when you do this, you do or don't have a picture of the dog beforehand? You just have their name and age?
Nope. They email me pictures of the human and animals in the house.
Got it. Okay. And I guess my biggest question is, how do you get clients for this? Because I can't imagine, and I could be wrong, that not many people are going to Google and searching how to talk to my dead dog, or that people are going to their vet and their vet is saying, I'm sorry we had to put Roxy down. Here's someone that you can communicate now that Roxy has passed over to the other side. I can't imagine many veterinarians saying that and then referring them to you, but I could be wrong. So how do folks find you? I'm really curious.
Yes. Well, the irony is in Wisconsin, I had a bunch of vets, holistic as well as Western medicine veterinarians, that would refer clients to me, and I would refer clients to them as well. So it's a great network. It's a great community, because sometimes you don't have time to say goodbye to your animal. Mm-hmm. And whether you come home and the animal's passed, or you wake up and the animal passed in their sleep, or there was this crisis and all of a sudden you had to rush them to the emergency room and they passed in the emergency room before you could even say goodbye. So there's that sense of not having closure. And then also like a nagging, gnawing feeling where you've hit every trainer and vet and behaviorist and acupuncturist, and you're looking for something to help bring closure or help and health to your animal on the earth, as well as after they've passed over. So sometimes it's through desperation that people will find me, or they will look up pet psychic, or who talks to animals, or, whatever it is, either way, I'm totally okay with being an animal communicator, interspecies communicator, or pet psychic or whatever. So desperate times calls for desperate measures, and especially if there's grieving to be had. And I had a client yesterday, a lovely client, that was very similar to her, where she brought her 2 dogs in for a checkup for a blood panel. And then her dogs, and he was bouncing and happy and saying hi to everybody. And then within 5 minutes, he started crashing, and then he had a ruptured, I forgot what it was called, on his heart. And then he bled out, and was like within a half an hour, he was gone. And so it's been about 2 months, and she just needed peace and closure and validation.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And what do you charge for that service?
20 minutes is $70. A half hour is $95, and the full hour is $175.
Okay. And what do most people do?
Depending, they usually, if they're brand new and they just want to try it out per se, they'll do a 20-minute session. And normally for 1 to 2 animals, I recommend 20 minutes, and 20 minutes does go by really quickly in surprisingly ways. And in a half hour, usually about 2 to 3 animals max, and then the full hour, 4 to 5. So sometimes people have 2 horses, a donkey, a cat, and a dog, and we'll cover all that in an hour.
Wow. Well, it's very interesting. I may even take take you up on it for Sunny, my childhood golden retriever. So we'll have to connect after this show. So any other really compelling or touching stories that come to mind in the afterlife communication service?
The other kind of far-fetched, far out there thing is that for those people that may or may not believe in reincarnation, is that the soul of that animal can come back to us in another form. I was raised non-denominational, so we didn't believe or talk about reincarnation. And even as I started this work, I was still kind of like a little like, whoa, I don't know about this. But I have witnessed and seen for myself an animal come back in another body, another dog form to their human. I have a client that's had a dog come back 3 different times in 3 different bodies. And so even just kind of going along with that is going back to the soul, as the soul goes back from body to body, human to animal, male to female. So it can come back as a male dog, it can come back as a female dog, can come back as a puppy. And the other kind of like little woo-woo out there is that it can also come in like as a 2 or 3-year-old dog, even though you might have just, lost them 4 or 5 months ago. So I've been witness to knowing these people and this animal, and then seeing them come back again has been amazing, mystical, magical, and beautiful. And I've also seen the animal, the dog, stay in the spirit plane, but then also send a new dog to their human for more love, healing, and compassion. And so it's like they can make that conscious choice. And I always say, for humans, we have free will and choice to do what we want, and animals do as well for the most part. So people ask me, will they come back to me? And I'll ask them, and sometimes they're like, yeah, I will. Or like, nope, I had a really tough life, and I'm just going to stay here and help and guide you and be like your angel, your guardian angel in the spirit plane.
Got it. So some of your other services here, I'll go down the list. I'm on allspirithealing.com, and under services we have afterlife communication, which we covered, animal communication, Reiki energy work, intuitive reading, shamanic journey, and coaching and mentoring. Which of those would be the most fruitful discussion for our listeners, do you think, in the time we have left?
Yes. Well, it's a little bit of a twofold, but intuitive work as well as energy work. So as I'm communicating with animals, and Reiki is just another form of a healing energy modality. So it's just like a mother, kissing a kid's boo-boo. It's like a transference of energy. And Reiki is just certain hand placements and symbols used to promote an overall sense of well-being for humans and animals. And it promotes and increases healing for the animal if they had some type of surgery or belly aches. So I'm able to help people and animals even across the world. I don't have to be in person, as well as in-person sessions to offer that. And it's just very soothing. It's non-invasive, and it's a complement to Western and holistic medicine. So I can incorporate that into a session, as well as I can also teach people and certify them on how to give Reiki for themselves or for others. Mm-hmm. And then continuing into the intuitive part, a lot of times the animals will say, well, hey, since we have my mom or my dad on the phone, let me go ahead and tell them about themselves. So the animal will say, he wants you to be careful for your back, that you hurt your back. And then they're like, yeah, I did. So it's just like learning to slow down a little bit more. Or the other dog, the other last week had said, you're worth more than that relationship. And because she had just divorced her now ex-husband, and she was very upset. And he says, you deserve better than that. And she was kind of staying in it for the dog, kind of like 50-50 custody. And a lot of times the animals will say very powerful, profound messages to their humans, and just validating and affirming that they're more than just 4 legs on the floor, and that they're a beautiful being and a sentient being where they see what's going on around us, in us, even if we don't say what's going on. They're reading our thoughts and our mind and our energy. there was a cat that had told me what this woman's boss had looked like verbatim description. So I told this woman what her boss looked like. The woman's mouth dropped on the floor, and she was just like, my boss has never come to my house. Like, how would she know what my boss looks like? Because the woman was on the phone, probably having a conversation or talking to her husband. And we are playing it over like a movie in our mind of how everything unfolded for the day. And our animals are watching us and saying, oh, okay, that happened. So they're giving us a clear description. And this cat was giving me this clear description of what her boss looked like. So a lot of times our animals are picking up on things. And that goes again back to 90% of the problems in our house with our animals usually goes back to us. The other 10% is usually health-related issues. The other common question animals ask is, are we moving? And then the human's just like, no, we're not moving. We just moved. And the dog's like, why are you always thinking about it? Or why are you always online? Or when we're driving down the street, like, oh, I could live there. Oh, I could live here. And then they start laughing. They're like, oh, guilty. Like, we don't realize that's what we're doing. We just like to look at houses. And then eventually down the road, we want to move or retire. So giving them a specific time frame, 5 years or 10 years and down the road. And if there was a move, it'd be a package deal. Like everybody would move together. So sometimes animals that are rescued are very fearful of being left behind. So they just need that, clear communication of that.
Got it. So it's almost like we could have titled this episode, How to Bring Out the Spiritual Guru in Your Dog.
Oh,
right? So,
that's delicious. Yes.
Yeah, well, might have to think about retitling that.
Or it could even be like how the dog brings out your spiritual guru within yourself, where it's just like, it can go either way, and how we are very masterful as well as they are, and what they bring out in us and we bring out in them. So we could definitely play on words with that.
Interesting. The part that's most fascinating to me is dogs kind of diagnosing health issues, right? So do you have any other examples of stories like that of dogs or cats kind of speaking through you and bringing to light health issues that an owner might not have known that they actually had at the time?
Oh gosh, tons of them, tons of story. The other part too with the health is there's mirroring. So the humans and animals will mirror each other. So the human fell and broke their ankle, and then the dog hurt their ankle. Or the human has cancer, the dog has cancer. The owner has diabetes, the dog has diabetes. So a lot of times the sympathy or the empathy is very common for the humans and the animals. And that also goes deeper with the emotional piece. Sometimes the human survives the cancer, but then the animal perishes from cancer. So it's almost like they came in the world to help their human to heal and then kind of left the world and saved their human. So that can also be very deep. On a lighter note, there was also a horse that said, my right hip is out and so is my human's. And then I told the owner, I'm like, oh, the horse said their hip is out and that your hip is out and too. She's like, oh my gosh, I am. She's like, I'm gonna have to call the chiropractor for me and for my horse. So that's also very common to have the similar injuries. There was also a heart-related issue there was a woman's husband that was in and out of the hospital with the high blood pressure, but also with some heart issues. And the dog said, so is he going to be okay? Because he says he's not really taking his medication like he should be. And the woman's like, well, I'll get on top of that and I'll make sure that he is, because the dog was worried that the husband wasn't going to live a long time because he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. So it's whether it's diagnosing or recognizing something going on, or even with the children of the house, so-and-so being out of school for a week laying on the couch and just want to know, is she going to be okay? So they see us.
Now, what would you say to the very, very, very skeptical listener who has actually listened and stayed on through the length of this episode, but is still very skeptical about it? What are the typical things that you hear from people in terms of, this being extremely woo-woo, or or anything else?
Yes. Well, first I would say thank you. Thank you for listening and to being open. And I'm not trying to force or shove anything down anyone's throat or anyone's beliefs. I always say let the animal do the talking. And well, like I said, I let the animals go first so they kind of begin to validate for the skeptical observer about their personality or things that are going on with the dog's body or things that they've noticed with, Johnny going off to college. So a lot of times the proof is in the pudding that the animal will come through with those validations. So I always say, come skeptical, just remain open. Also allow yourself to be surprised. And even if you don't believe by the end of the podcast, that's okay. But just they hopefully got a little message or two, and that they can also look at their animal a little differently and to have more clear communication with their animal about their daily life and their routine, or why they're going to change something in the house or changing the food, that they hopefully can get a good couple tangible ideas and lessons they can use at home.
Okay. Now on your website, allspirithealing.com, you have a newsletter sign up. So what would someone expect to get, and how frequently by signing up for your newsletter?
It's usually about 2 to 3 times a month. Right now it's about two times a month. I'll offer classes, and sometimes it's in person or over the internet, Zoom, different modalities to better themselves and to deepen their bond with the animals. Different tips, like animal communication tips, once a month or twice a month, about how they can communicate with their animal or what their animal is trying to communicate with them. And any other good tidbits for us humans and how to better our lives. And sometimes I give a little tidbits about nutrition for ourselves and for our animals. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for a little bit for animals and a little bit for us humans. So it's like we want to practice more self-care for ourselves. We always put our animals and people first. So it's just like I try to include a little bit of both.
Got it. And in terms of actually working with you, I was on your website now, and there's a schedule an appointment, a nice big button there. And so someone can walk through and pick from any number of these services, a few of them that we covered here, including the afterlife. And I assume you just go through this and schedule, and then they would pay right through your website, or that happens afterwards?
Yes, exactly. It's 4 quick, easy steps. They pick the time and date and their time zone that they're in. They put in their information. They make the payment through PayPal. They get an email confirmation of letting to know about the payment, as well as an email of all the information that's needed to send me for that time and that appointment. And then I'll call them at that designated time. It's very easy. And
it's a phone call, not a video call.
Yes, phone call. And sometimes we can do a video call, but again, I don't have to be face to face, and the animal can be laying down. Some people put me on speaker, which I don't have to be, but some people like to take notes, as we go, because some things will make sense, right away, and some things will make more sense afterwards. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's just over the phone. Okay.
All right, Stacy. Well, I think this has been super interesting and fascinating, and I think listeners will get a lot out of it. If anything, like me, a new perspective on this, and very interesting, kind of compelling stories there. So, anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you, Tim, and just your listeners, and hopefully we can look forward to working together, or even just jumping on the newsletter and just learning more tidbits and tricks, as well as on my blog. I give lots of examples about afterlife, as well as with pain, and different validations there, so they can learn that way too.
Got it. Okay. And you're also on Facebook, I see, as well.
Yes, they can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. So Facebook, Instagram at All Spirit Healing. And okay, so Stacy Krafczyk with All Spirit Healing. That's allspirithealing.com. And she's on the West Coast, but available on all time zones. Yes. And thanks so much, Stacy. It's been great.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity, and have a great rest of your day.
Okay, you too.
Thanks.